All right, welcome to part two. Hopefully you just watched part one on Brodie Brazil's YouTube channel. If you didn't, you can watch it later or right now and then come back. I'm cool with either one. But right now we're going to start with the very important question that everyone always asks me during an interview. What percentage do I think the A's are going to stay in Oakland versus Vegas? Recently, Brodie, I had a very controversial take. I said 55 Vegas, 45 Oakland. That set everything on fire. Where are you?
I'm 65-65.
How?
Yeah, no, that's not possible. No, I just seeing if you were paying attention. I'll be honest. I think I'm at one of the lower points I've ever been in favorably the team staying in Oakland, which is obviously what I prefer. I don't hide any comments about that. I'm very forthright. That's what I hope happens, but I do think that maybe we really are down to like 50-50 at this point. Now, I was somebody who maybe even 2 years ago, 75%, maybe 80 after some nights, maybe down to 70 other opportunities and situations, but I really do feel like it has diminished and degraded, and it's not one particular thing, Casey, that has brought me down to literally 50-50, which I hate, by the way, such a generic term, right? It doesn't do well for somebody trying to watch this and really get a grasp. But it's 50% is still quite good. But at this point, we haven't seen movement. We've seen an overall picture of things that just does not bode well. We've seen so much silence now for almost 6 months on all fronts. You can talk about the A's not really bringing this up publicly. Commissioner Rob Manfred has decided not to yet reach out, at least as we know, to the Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao. She is not talking about this unless asked about the Howard Terminal project. Meanwhile, we know that work is proceeding in Las Vegas. So I don't know that I'll ever sway until I see renderings or things moving forward in Las Vegas like you did to say that they are the front runners. I think I'm still a ways away from that, but I think I'm kind of right now at that 50% position, which honestly is not extremely comfortable.
Yeah, I would say I was as high as 60-70% as well, because a lot of things were going right. Like everything that could have possibly gone in their favor
BCDC
went in their favor.
Exactly. All the votes, the lawsuits going away for the most part.
We've never been this far. We've never been this far.
No, there were a lot of
stadium built
absolutely
in
a lot of developments.
It's literally never happened.
Yep.
So that's why I was as high as 60. I dropped down to 50 when the silence hit. The deal wasn't made with the previous administration. I was like, all right, maybe it's 50-50. When I started hearing the stuff I heard from a source about the Rio side, I started getting a bit more worried. That's why I've knocked it down to 45% Oakland. But I think if you look at it overall, we're still roughly in the same range. If you're 50-50, I'd say I'm, 45-55. And that could change very quickly in either direction. I will say this, and this is interesting. When I made that video and put it out, I had a few people reach out to me, and they weren't exactly happy with my estimate that Vegas had pulled into the lead. And let's just say people in the city are a bit more confident than I am that this thing's going to get pulled off.
People in the city of Oakland?
Yes. Okay. Oh, yes. People internally feel a little bit higher about the percentages. I'd say they're more in the 60-40 range. And I think the reason they feel that way, I've checked with multiple people. I talked to a lot of people after I put out that video, and I think they feel that the deal is still pretty close. They just need the last remaining grants to come in. And if those grants come in, they think they can make this thing happen.
I think time, Casey, is what we're up against here, right? Because it's, as much as Oakland takes a lot longer just inherently to do things, and the process is way more difficult, and the prospect of Las Vegas, like I made a video a while back saying it's like dominoes, and as soon as you get them lined up, they can fall in Oakland, and they're standing in Oakland. They're just not lined up. In Las Vegas, the dominoes are not necessarily even standing yet, but if they get lined up quick, there's like 3 dominoes instead of 20. Things could move a lot quicker there. But overall, like going back to the percentage thing, I think for me the percentage has dwindled a bit because time has progressed, and time at some point runs out on the Coliseum. Time keeps the door open for Las Vegas. We are sports people. We're not politicians. We're not great at a lot of other things, but we do understand sports. And in sports, when you have a lead and you don't put a team away, right? You keep them in, you let them in the game. At some point, something bad happens. And with this game, with no clock necessarily on the end of it, you don't want the game to keep going on longer than it needs to.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. The dominoes analogy, the leaving people. I mean, I think that right now the A's have a situation where there are people on base. The game is entirely winnable, but if the next batter doesn't step up and hit one, either a squib, a bloop,
put it
hit
in
it off
play,
the wall, hit a homer. I mean, they just got to do something, just anything, and maybe the dominoes can start falling if we're going to mix all the metaphors. But right now, I'd say Vegas is like setting up their dominoes. I think in Oakland, dominoes have started falling, but the one domino missed the next one, and someone else just has to give it a little push.
Right. I agree with you. And I think that city of Oakland domino right now, and the infrastructure money, which apparently we were 10% away from, and then inflation happened, and the goalpost just keeps on moving. Like $350 million have been secured, as far as I understand, correct, by the city of Oakland through federal and state grants to pay for the offsite infrastructure. But the problem is we used to be only about $30 million away from the grand total. The grand total has now probably gotten a lot closer to $500 million. Maybe after another year, I don't know, is it $600 million? So we're going to have to settle in with the realization that that number is going to keep changing. And it's intimidating. Now, I know they do this in other projects all over the place all the time, but as it relates to this one, when you're on such a bigger scale of the cost, it gets to some pretty extraordinary numbers. And the way you have to secure that money, not from Oakland, not through public money from Oakland's general fund, it becomes a lot more difficult when you're looking for scholarships for everything.
Yeah, and that's where it gets real tricky, because if they'd been able to pounce on this quicker, let's just say if one side, the A's, wasn't dragging their feet versus the other side, maybe this was a whole lot less expensive. The other issue is, like, when people tell me, oh, Oakland doesn't want to keep the A's, they don't care about sports, or oh, the A's don't want to stay here, they're just trying to go to Las Vegas. That's all total bunk, because they thought they needed like $352 million in offsite funds. Oakland did it. They delivered. Right? Like they did exactly what the A's asked them to do. But then inflation hit, and interest rates went up, and everything went bad with like materials and all these other things. And are we just like, also, I feel like we just totally gloss over all the time. There was a global pandemic in the middle of all of this, right? Like, that's not the A's fault. Right. That's not the city's fault.
When we look back and say this has been going on for years now, there was a full year, basically most of 2020 and into the beginnings of 21, where life was not operating normally in most regards. And for March, April, May, June, July of 2020, I could barely care about sports, let alone baseball, let alone the future home of the Oakland A's. Like it went very back burner. You're right, and had to resurface. So I'm not making every excuse in the book, but you're right. Perspective on that is important.
Yeah, I'd say so. And it's funny, it just hit me like as I was delivering that point. Everybody has some criticism about this and that. But yes, the pandemic literally hit in the middle of this very specific Howard Terminal process, and that really threw things for a loop because it made everything more expensive. It really messed with a lot of different things. And so, yeah, I think that's a factor too. But, there's several remaining grants. I actually pulled it up on my phone. They got about $140 million right here on this list that they're trying to acquire. And all of these federal funds applications were due last year. So they're all in. They're just waiting to see the results. And if they can land some of these $140 million worth of grants, I think that is a very significant amount. Like if we were to estimate how much money is left between, paying for the offsite versus not, I'd say it's about maybe 300 million right now. And if you take 140 million out of that, it starts becoming a bit more manageable in terms of whether or not John Fisher wants to pony it up and finance it, or whether or not the city could come up with a limited obligation bond, one unlike the one that the Oakland Raiders used to build Mount Davis and screw the taxpayers. A limited obligation bond would not hurt the taxpayers in the same way. And maybe that's sellable if it's, in the 150 million range as opposed to 300.
I wonder how either close or if the number has to be absolutely met and matched and maybe even exceeded. Like if ultimately we come back and we hear, okay, the infrastructure is going to cost $497 million. So does it mean before we can actually shake hands, sign papers, get into binding vote season, like officially, and do it, does that money entirely need to be secured, or can it be like, well, we're 20 short, but we got it. We'll figure this out. Or does it need to be over, like to protect for future inflation and maybe a couple percent per year of expected inflation? So I'm at a loss to that. I need to know more about that. I know you and I would love to ask specific questions about stuff like that if there was the opportunity.
Would answer, right?
But there's not a lot of opportunity for these types of questions, and you kind of wonder behind the scenes, like, is this the stuff that's actually being hashed out right now?
Well, therein lies the problem. You see why both sides would be gun shy on a deal. You see why John Fisher would say, hey, you guys didn't want our term sheet. You made your own, and your term sheet said you were paying for the offsite fund.
Right.
So now you're asking me to pay for it? No, thank you.
No, that is a factor. You would see why
the city would say, well, we have X amount of grants, but we don't have quite enough, or maybe we've raised enough, but we don't know if the price is going to go even higher down the road. And if we agree and we say yes, and then all of a sudden the price explodes again, what happens to our taxpayers? What happens to our general fund? So
right.
I think you could see why both sides would be afraid to make a deal at this point. And, I think maybe that limited obligation bond or some type of bond they could create would at least protect them from the overages. Also, like, let's be honest, construction. I mean, I've done it on my house. You've done construction on your house, and It doesn't always end up the cost they think it is.
Never.
And let's just say they think they have all the money, then they get in the ground and something else pops up.
Right.
Well, then they got a whole other can of worms. And so I could see the hesitation on both sides.
You want to make sure when you start a project of this magnitude that, number one, if you start construction, you will finish construction. There will not be anything that gets in your way, either environmentally or financially. Number two, you just don't want to get, if you're the city of Oakland, and they've already declared this, I recognize it and I fully agree. They don't want to eventually have to be held responsible for the final stretch, finishing up the final amount. And I don't think that's unreasonable of them to ask that, of them to demand that. So it's a lot of T's and a lot of I's to cross and dot here. And I think that's been a part of the equation, but that's not the entire part of why we're still here going around in circles. Yeah,
but that in itself is why, if we circle back to the first question, I dropped down to 45, right?
Yeah.
Because even in the most opportunistic, optimistic scenario, there's still way too many questions. And when I look at the Rio side in Las Vegas, they already have water and sewage and all the other stuff hooked up to that land because there's a major hotel there. Yeah, and they already have all this property. And I could see why the A's would look at that and go, well, heck, that seemed way easier.
There's also
building on this port where there's nothing.
There's
right?
also like neighborhoods of houses that are pre-existing, like just a block or two north of the Rio. Now, how does it work that they would be okay down there? And again, this is the same thing that Howard Terminal has gone through. Like, can you logistically put a ballpark here? Can you get 35,000 in and out on a regular basis? How would Las Vegas residents, are they Las Vegasites, Las Vegans, whatever? They're not vegans. They're not all vegans. But how, like, the neighborhoods surrounding the Rio, they're probably okay with the hotel, but 35,000 in and out, 81 times per summer, that's a whole different equation there. So, like, I don't know that, as much as we talk about how, building on the waterfront in Oakland is difficult, the Rio site, maybe even the Tropicana site, does come with, I got to think it comes with some complexities, right? It's not entirely a slam dunk, is it?
I don't know if it's entirely slam dunk, and they want the public funds also to build there, because if you're John Fisher, again, you build a stadium here, it's probably a $1 billion process. You build a stadium in Vegas, it's a $1.5 to $2 billion process, because you need the retractable roof or some type of roof to combat the summer heat.
Right.
So the other aspects of it would have to be a whole lot easier, because, if he builds here in Oakland, it's a $6 billion development, but he's just building the stadium. He's going to bring in other people to build all the other stuff and just be the master tenant. In Vegas, he's just building the stadium there as well, but the rest of the infrastructure is going to be dramatically cheaper, most likely, and probably a whole lot easier, and it's not California. So I think if you really looked at where the A's interests lie, like, John Fisher's a Bay Area guy. Dave Cavill went to Stanford. Billy Beane is a Bay Area guy. He didn't want to go be a GM somewhere else or a part owner somewhere else. Like,
Right.
I think all these people really want to be here, but at some point, if they don't feel like they can get the deal done, then they're going to be left with no choice but to try to build somewhere else.
Let's jump over the fence for a second. Let's you and I play Las Vegas. Or let's be our buddy Mick Akers for a second. If you're ranking the three sites that are up for contention right now, the Rio is most talked about. I know that's what has you at least on alert the most right now. I still feel like the Tropicana site has got to be number one. It's on the Strip. It would put you in walking range of basically every tourist that's going up and down Las Vegas Boulevard. Rio is a little bit of a walk, right? So maybe number two, maybe a little bit less land. I mean, if you go to the Tropicana site, right, you're demolishing that entire structure, right? You're starting from scratch. And then there's the festival grounds, which probably for me is number three. It's further north. It's next to Circus, which I don't know has $800 million to totally redo, and it probably needs that by about now. Plus, the festival grounds do make money and offer opportunity like right now, so you're taking that away. I just think that Tropicana 1, Rio 2, festival grounds 3 is how I'd rank it. How about you?
I would agree. I think the Tropicana site's your holy grail because it's right there smack in the middle of the Strip. It's right across from MGM Grand. But the reason they've had problems with the Tropicana site is just because of that. It's prime real estate.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be inspired in Las Vegas to give up free money to fix that real estate. Like anybody in the world would pay through the nose to be right there.
Right.
So there's not a lot of incentive in giving public funds to help fix that spot. You don't need it. The festival ground side, I would say, is probably number 2 in my mind in terms of desirability because it is on the Strip.
Good point.
You know, like it or not, on the Strip matters. And that site is on the Strip. That's also why I think the Rio site is the most concerning to me because I think that's the site that Las Vegas or Nevada or Clark County or whoever's considering putting up public money would be the most interested in putting public money to, because that's not exactly the site that is the biggest draw. They need more help there to boost that part of the city or the Strip. They don't really need a lot of help at the Tropicana site. They need a little bit of help at the festival ground site, but not as much. And I think that the owner's dreamscape of the Rio site are the most inclined to work with the A's. And I think that will get them the best sweetheart deal. And we know they're looking for a sweetheart deal. So again, I think the Rio is probably the least sexy site, but I think it's going to become the most sexy site when it comes to the amount of money that John Fisher's going to have to spend to get something built.
Have you stayed in either the Rio or the Tropicana?
No, I don't go to Vegas much.
I stayed at the Trop once. I'm okay. And this was 15 years ago. It was in need of help back then. I don't know how I got on that conversation, but yeah. Let's tear
well,
ballpark or not.
I looked at the Rio.
Let's tear it down.
$20. You could go stay there for $20. And it's about a mile, like as the crow flies, from the Bellagio fountains. So if you were to build at the Rio, you're like straight across from the fountains. I think that would be maybe something alluring to people. I don't know.
How about this? If the A's stay in Oakland, you and I go take a boys' weekend in Las Vegas to celebrate. I'm sure our wives will understand that what we've been going through for a couple of years. They'll give us a day or two without the kids.
Yeah, and all we need is like $40 or $50 to stay the weekend at the
That's my point. We'll go stay at the Rio one night. How's the buffet? Yikes.
That sounds like a plan. But only after we know they're staying here, please.
Right. That's going to be our celebration for all of this.
What do you think breaks the dam here? What do you think needs to happen before we actually get a ballpark, shovels in the ground?
I think issue number 1A in Oakland is infrastructure money, and they just want to make sure that Oakland's reserved about bearing the cost of this. I think the A's are like, hey, we're already putting here a very lucrative project forward. We've paid a lot to get us to this point. Like, let's not forget, the A's have basically financed all of the operation to get to this point of the conversation. I think they just need to make sure that it can be paid for. It's like any big decision. I know, you have a home, I have a home, and buying a home, like, it's an intimidating process. It doesn't happen usually overnight, and it's intimidating because you're looking at large sums of money that you definitely don't have yet in most cases, and you're trying to figure out, like, is this feasible? Does this make sense? Am I putting myself in a position where 5, 10, 20 years down the road, this is all going to make sense? And I just think there's an intimidation factor. And right now, you have these two sides that are pretty close to their budging points. And I still think there's flexibility to make it happen, but they're just not nervous. They're so cautious about this. So it has to be done right. It has to be black and white. I just think that there's not a lot of room for gray area when it comes to that. Now, the separate thing is affordable housing. I think that as part of a development agreement, I mean, it's a huge part of it. It's the biggest part Oakland wants. They just want more people being able to afford and live in residence in the city of Oakland. And obviously that'll benefit them for the long run. Taxpayers, more people in the neighborhood to make it more viable. But I don't know how that conversation shakes out. We talked before about there's a set threshold of here's how much the law requires. Oakland wants significantly more. Obviously, to a certain extent, it's not that the A's, I think maybe they get criticized for saying they don't want affordable housing as part of their project. They're just looking at numbers here. If we're going to do this for it to be financially viable, you can't have it all be affordable housing because then the project won't maybe necessarily pay for itself, or this can't happen this way. So it's a fine and delicate balance, I think, of projects and numbers and math. I think, honestly, to sum it up, math is the biggest problem right now. With some politics and some hurt feelings and all the history, all that stuff. But literally numbers right now, I think, probably stand in the way the most.
Yeah, numbers, money. I think that the A's agree that affordable housing is good, but they want to pay the state mandated and not much more than that because, you look at Las Vegas right now, I think that they're trying to incentivize people to come. Oakland right now is saying, oh, you want to build here? Okay. More. I think that, you got it. It's a two-way street. I think we got to hit two things real fast. Let's end on Joe Lacob and the Joe Lacob factor, because I think that could be one thing that breaks this thing wide open, but I don't know if it's entirely likely because the A's are not for sale right now.
Right.
The other is the Oakland Coliseum site, the African American Sports Entertainment Group, and their plans there. My understanding of AASEG's plans are they're going to have 50% of the site. They have the controlling half, and there are no people on the planet who want Howard Terminal to happen more than those guys. Like, those guys want the A's to get Howard Terminal and get the heck off that property. But
get
right
off
now,
my
the A's
lawn.
own half.
Get off my lawn that I just bought 50% of.
The A's own half, but the A's half does nothing. It has no control. I mean, at this point, they could just squat on that half and collect revenue off of whatever AASEG builds there. So I think eminently AASEG needs to come up with a plan to buy out the A's half and hopefully have some of their influential sphere used to get the A's Howard Terminal. How do you see that whole thing playing out?
I think you make a good point. I think AASEG is focused on what they want to do at the site, but to your biggest thing you could lay out there, like, for it to happen, the A's need to be off the premises. And I'm just for any group that wants to advocate for the right reasons for Howard Terminal happening. And again, for the right reasons. I don't want to force this through. I don't want to put Oakland in a vulnerable spot. I know they don't want that either. They're very much a grassroots organization. So I would love for them to help facilitate. Now, I know that's not necessarily their job, right? They're focused on redeveloping, and they're putting all their resources into what are we going to do with this, this site right next to 880. But they need to. You're right. They need to see this process move forward too. I will say this: I love the Coliseum site as being very valuable for Oakland in the future. I certainly don't think that a modern day stadium works there again. Look at where teams are going. I mean, I drew up this list here of all the California sports venues in the last 20 years: Golden One Center, Chase Center, Oracle Park, Petco Park in San Diego, Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles. They're all downtown venues, and like Levi Stadium is one that is not, and I don't know if it gets the glowing reviews and has entirely yet the success that all these others have had. But that site, not viable for the future of baseball. I caution anybody who buys into the promise of, well, we'll bring a National Football League team here. No, you're going to get a team in London, in Barcelona, and in Munich before you get one in Oakland again. I'm sorry, but that's just the way the NFL is going to operate. And also, like the promise of a WNBA team, which I will say, way overdue for our region. I think the WNBA should have been represented like a decade or two ago. I don't know where their best suited home is in the Bay Area, but I think Oakland would be a great one. However, if you're saying, hey, take this cavernous 19,000 seat Oracle Arena or former Oracle Arena and play there, it's already outdated. It's already, it's been dormant for the most part for years now. I think the WNBA has 25, 30 home games a year. If that's, it's not a regular tenant. I want the WNBA to be here and succeed. That site might be great, but that current building that they have, I don't know if that's the long-term solution. So again, I see a lot of good things. AASEG, I know that they'll do this the right way. I'm a little concerned with some of the sports promises. This site doesn't have to be about sports anymore. It really doesn't. But I agree that maybe they should be proponents of getting the ball rolling too.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful site, housing, commercial.
Yeah.
They're going to keep the arena. So heck, get the WNBA in there. Maybe figure out something with the Oakland roots. But as a site, I think it's transportation. It's a good transportation hub. I think building something there that is not a stadium is ideal. And I think that's what they want to do. But if they invested $10 billion in that site, the A's would just sit there and kick back and collect revenue. So they got to get them off that site, get them out of there. And I'm sure there's a deal that could be struck there, especially if the A's do leave for Las Vegas. If the A's leave for Las Vegas, nobody's pulling any punches with the A's when they say, oh, maybe we need to play one more year here in the Coliseum. It's like, nope, bye-bye. Well, get out of here. Go play in the AAA park. We're not letting you extend that lease for even a day if you're not committed to staying in Oakland. So 2024, the end of the 2024 season, that lease is up. And if the A's don't have some concrete promises to stay in Oakland, they're getting booted. I guarantee you that much, because AASEG needs to get something built there. Lastly, Joe Lacob. I think that if you look at the article John Shea wrote when he interviewed Joe Lacob, and Lacob said he had a standing offer to buy the A's, that really intrigued a lot of people. I know he still has a standing offer and he's still interested in buying the A's, but they're not for sale. So at what point could John Fisher maybe get frustrated enough, or maybe Las Vegas becomes a real enough threat that a group led by Lacob could come in and try to save the A's here? Because what's not really happening here, not to get off on too much of an aside, is there's no group trying to save Oakland baseball here. And there's also not a group in Vegas that's trying to get A's baseball there either. It's kind of a weird situation, but I just don't know how eager Lacob would be to jump into another massive construction project like he did with Chase Center.
It gets complicated. Is he part owner of the team? Is he buying into that? Is he buying into just the project? It's good to have friends, right? Casey, if I was at the bar and I was a couple dollars short of that IPA that I really wanted, I wouldn't hesitate to be like, Casey, can I get a few bucks? I'll pay you back. I'll Venmo you. Which I probably say that and then I probably won't. But it's so complicated. We're talking about specifics and opportunities and maybe those of us in the public sphere, maybe we've been too blunt about, the conversations about, well, can somebody join A's ownership? In reality, it's like, maybe it can be more creative than that. Maybe it can be somebody who wants to just join the project side of this. It's way beyond my pay grade to understand that, but I'm just wondering if we've been too black and white about that issue. Maybe there are more opportunities for anybody, if we really are short between Oakland and between the A's, and it's a hard pull for both these sides. Like, who could be somebody else that steps in and helps out both sides? And it doesn't have to be about owning the team. It doesn't have to be about giving the city money. But how can somebody else jump in here, help benefit, and help everybody benefit?
Well, that's a brilliant way to look at it, frankly. I mean, John Fisher has more money than Joe Lacob. It's not like Joe Lacob can just buy the team, and here's my team. It's my team now. Like, he owns the Warriors with Peter Guber.
Well, to your point,
need partners.
It's not
to
for
do this.
It's not for sale either, right? So if I want that beer, but I don't want to ask you for money, like it's something I prefer not to do, and I don't know the reason why. I don't know you. I don't know how this is going to go. It's almost, it's a non-point even until that's ever being considered. And from what we understand,
we get another glass, and then you pour some in mine, and then we share the beer. Right? That's it. That's
how did this go
it.
straight to beer? Oh, that's my fault. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah, I mean, look, it goes into personal sides of things, business sides of things, legal and contractual sides of things that are far beyond me. Would I like to see this done however it reasonably can be? Of course. And if adding somebody else to the equation facilitates it and makes it successful for everybody, and if it's the only way possible, right? I'm not against somebody asking for help if that seems like a good idea and if everybody benefits from it.
100%. Real quick, before we go, I know we got to wrap.
We're all good.
Relocation fee in Vegas.
Yeah.
Total bunk, right? Total bunk.
It's reported $2 billion, right? That the owners of all the teams would split. So to forego that, and even if it was deferred over even 15, 20 years, I mean, that's several $1 million per year per team. It's been said, I mean, it's been straightforward said by Rob Manfred, right? It's hard to understand how a vote was ever taken on that, or that the owner said, you know what, we're good. We'll pass on that. It's free money. I don't know anything specific. Not in that inner circle. It's interesting.
Yeah, I just don't see why anybody would agree. I just don't. I do not understand why, after giving revenue sharing money to the A's out of their pockets, they now want to pass free money. And the thing that really sticks with me is, if this really truly came down to a vote, I just don't understand why the Dodgers and the Padres in particular would be okay with the Giants having the whole half of the state to themselves now. It just doesn't seem like the math adds up to me. I just don't get it. So I don't know. Maybe it's a bluff. Maybe it isn't. It just doesn't seem very logical to me.
Well, baseball in this market with two teams has worked for a long period of time. And just because maybe in recent years, with a lot of different things going on, because it hasn't been its most successful, it's easy for some people to play the short game and say, well, look at these years. But if you look at the bigger picture, if you look at all the years, it's proven that this market is big enough for both. And if you're baseball, I don't see why you wouldn't want to maintain that. Like, maintain it in Oakland and then eventually add to it in Las Vegas. To Bryce Harper's point, there would be an expansion fee, just like there would be a relocation fee for most teams. Apparently, the commissioner says not here, but like that $2 billion is probably a similar amount if you're going to start a new team in Las Vegas. So we'll see, but it's all a question to me of how this will play out and what's going to be the final things that push something through somewhere.
Yeah, I'd agree. To close, I will say the A's aren't talking. The mayor's not really talking. Commissioner Manfred won't answer my emails, but I'm glad that we're still talking. As long as we're still talking, then A's fans are getting some answers, right?
I'm just deleting your number out of my phone here. I will not be calling you back anymore. Yeah, and I hope people know that have watched this far in this video, and then the other one that's on my channel, and all the other little short clips that'll come out here. I wish, Casey, you and I were spending more time going straight to the people who are in the know and could give us more information and would do it on camera, would do it publicly, but we're kind of left to our own devices here, honestly. We really are. So we're trying to do our best to explain it to people. We know this is important. And we will just keep doing the service of trying to be accurate, trying to be informative, and trying to give you the vibe as far as we can read it. So,
yeah, we'll keep talking to people on background, even if they won't go on camera. That's where we get all of our good information anyways, people. Don't worry. We're getting a lot of information, whether people will be public about it or not. But, maybe we'll do another one of these in a couple months and it'll be past May and we'll know that they've extended the agreement with the port and maybe a whole lot of other things will have happened. I feel like we do these, we empty everything out we got, and then a couple months later we text each other like, we got to do another one. So until next time, right?
Have you thought about the moment, though, where we do get some ultimate news and could go either way here, right? Like, even if we do our next video and renderings have just come out for the Rio hotel site in Las Vegas, I don't know that you and I are going to be so upbeat on that. We'll do our best. But, things could slant greatly by the next time we talk. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I said that in our last video too, though. I think it could get a lot worse before it gets better. And it still hasn't gotten all the way worse. It can get much more worse than from where we're at. So warning, bumpy roads lie ahead, but they're not the end.
It's been good talking to you, buddy. We'll
Likewise,
do it again.
Man.
We'll do it again soon.
All right. Don't forget, subscribe on Brodie's channel, my channel, throw likes all over the place. Until next time.